So it seems as ever in the UK, we have a split of opinion. And I just want to flash this up, which was two separate articles I saw this morning, both released within about an hour of each other, talking about where we should be going with interest rates. One of them saying that we must get interest rates down as soon as possible. The other saying they're not going to go down anywhere until we get wages under control. But the issue is, and why I titled the video this today, how can we actually be sure with any of the data that's coming up? Is all of the data actually just a load of rubbish? Is it manufactured? Is it manipulated? Or is it just inaccurate because of various things we've been speaking about over the last couple of months? Is the integrity of the data accurate to be making decisions of? So I want to answer some of those questions today. And the first one of those questions, or one of those data sets I want to look through, is actually going to be the nationwide report. Because we had the nationwide HPI come out yesterday. Amazingly, it came out still in January. So that's the first time I've seen them get it out before the first of the following month. So even right there, I'm not sure the integrity of January's figures, if there's still figures coming in. But I want to dive into the HPI report, which on the face of it is showing that we've got some positivity going on in the housing market. But how is that going to affect perception and sentiment? And how actually does perception and sentiment affect the markets? We want to look at that. And then I'm going to go into the Bank of England monetary report, which came out today. So we've had the MPC meeting. Probably no massive surprise that we've held interest rates at 5.25% or base rate. However, there are some absolute golden gems that have come out in the report that we're going to crunch the numbers of. And even though I've not seen any particular narrative out in the media of a direction of interest rates, the narrative is the bank are sitting on their hands and waiting. There's actually some stuff in that report which I feel is pretty compelling that they've changed their mind and they're looking at interest rates coming down quickly as well. So we want to look at, is that data accurate? And then at the end, I want to summarize by looking at what are the threats over the next few months, okay, to this, with this positive sentiment we have, or at least this increasing positive sentiment. We're probably not actually positive, but less negative, if that makes sense. What are the threats? What can take us under? So first of all, team, we are live, so please give me a thumbs up if you can hear me or see me, just to make sure we have someone on. If you want to put, I can see some thumbs up coming in. If you want to put anything in the comments, please put your questions as we go through. Please put your thoughts as you go through. If you're watching on the replay, as always, please do the same, and I'll always come back and answer those questions for you. And if you're new to the channel, just to let you know what we do here is my aim on these live streams is to look objectively under the hood of the mainstream media headlines, which generically is completely wrong, right? Generally, we see very lazy reporting in mainstream media. So actually find out what's going on so we can make better decisions, better investment decisions or house buying decisions or business decisions based on what we think is actually going to happen. So that is my aim. So with that in mind, thank you for all the likes. And by the way, if you are new to the channel or if you are a regular to the channel, and you come back and watch over and over again, but you have not subscribed yet to the channel, please, I would ask you, it's the one favor, the one thing I would ever ask you to do is to subscribe to the channel. It's the biggest metric that YouTube looks for to give me more reach. And if we get more reach, we get more resources that I can put into this. And then I don't have to go AWOL like I did last week because I was so busy. I can actually get resources in to help me up the production value and make these live streams better and more effective for you. So please hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't done so already. So let's go on and, hey Stafford, how you doing? Let's go on and talk about house prices with the nationwide HPI. So headline, UK house prices rose 0.7% month on month in January. However, that is the seasonally adjusted house price. So if we look at nominal, I get why they do it, because seasonally adjusted figures is a methodology to smooth out ups and downs and cycles. When I'm looking at house prices, the main thing I care about is the nominal, so the actual amount they've changed rather than the seasonally adjusted figure. So if we look at the nominal, okay, down here, we can see that December we're 257,443, here we're 257,656. So we are a whole, what is that, £200 more than we were in December? Let's face it, that's not 0.7% monthly change. That is flatline, okay? So unexpectedly, because the narrative for the last couple of months has been the freeze in the property market, we are still flatline, right? And we are used to seeing a seasonal rebound in January anyway. And when we looked at the Zoopla HPI last week, we saw the sort of buyers coming back. And I feel we are thawing out but that's January. This is looking at December. No, sorry. No, we are looking at January's figure. We're not looking at December's figure. This is January's figure. So, we're kind of still flatline as far as I'm concerned. Not a massive amount has changed here. There are a couple of things that I would like to point out on this. And the one big thing I'm going to click on is this graph here, which is the UK house price to earnings ratio, okay? Just completely disregard the long run average, right? That long run average is irrelevant, because if you actually zoom out for the last 200 years, we saw it really high, sort of end of the 19th century, then post kind of as we went into mass home building, when homes became smaller and people's wages started going up, kind of industrially revolutionary time, they started coming down considerably and kind of flatlined where they were for a while. And then in the 90s, we can see we've gone from 3 up to where we are now. I don't care about the long run average. I think, times are different. We can't take too much into that. It's the trend that we want to see. And this is one of the biggest things that is propping the housing market up in nominal terms. Don't forget, this is nominal UK house price to earnings, not inflation adjusted. We have seen a considerable decrease in the house price to earnings ratio. It's still high, but it's kind of no higher than we're sitting 2014 to 2019. It's lower than we were at the peak of the financial crisis. It's definitely lower than where we were post-COVID pandemic. And that has made it easier for people, it's given the property market a soft landing. So there was a couple of comments on from my this week's video, where I talked about the push-pull factors that are in play with the property market. And let's just clarify here. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of factors that are pulling it in one direction and sort of pushing it in another, and they're all very conflicting factors. And I made a comment that affordability is actually now increasing, or at least the perception of affordability is increasing, because we've come out of the cost of living crisis. Utilities are, I fixed one of my properties yesterday with British Gas on, I think it was 6.9p a kilowatt hour for the gas, which, bearing in mind, I think we were something like last year, like 15 or 20p. I can't remember the kilowatt hour, but we're something like half to almost a third of where we were a year ago fixing onto these things. That's playing out to make things more affordable. People's incomes, macro, are going up. I'm going to talk about employment, or unemployment in a bit. But the perception is that things are easing. Inflation is coming down. And one of the comments I made, and I'll just bring this up on the iPad, is the impact of the 2p main national insurance rate cut, which comes in April. Oh no, sorry, it's coming already, hasn't it? I think so. It's coming. Did it come in January? Come in this month? I can't remember. Whenever it's coming in, April or January, or if it's already in. When it comes in, it's actually this year going to have a fairly decent effect on people's affordability, versus the fiscal drag of the stealth tax of income tax brackets staying the same. So when we look at this, okay, if I just highlight this bit down here, that little bit down there, that is the only demographic who are going to be worse off. So those who are being dragged into the higher rate income tax brackets versus losing your 2p or reduction of 2p national insurance, most people are going to be better off for this year. Don't forget, this fiscal drag is going to happen probably for the next 5 years. So next year, I'd imagine it's going to be reversed. But this year, there's going to be a bit more affordability. So talk about affordability improving. I believe it is improving for people. And when you look at a big picture, right, because house prices have stayed level and wages are going up on nominal terms, the UK house price to income ratio, or house price to earnings ratio, is improving for people. We've got it here in black and white. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's the first thing I'd like to say. So that's the biggest thing I take away from the nationwide. Okay, that we're pretty much flatlining. If we go, let's just go back and just have a look at the actual price graph for property prices, just to prove this fact. Again, if we look at this, we had the lot. Interestingly, the major drop we had was following mini budget, although I believe we were dropping below mini budgets, before mini budget. So we were peaking sort of August 22. Don't forget, these are the bank HPIs, not the ONS, which will probably have a 6-9 month lag on it. Significant drop, little bounce, but fundamentally we are flatlined at this level, okay, because the property market is stationary. So that's where we are right now, but that's the rear view mirror. So what we want to be able to do is we want to look in the future and go, what's going to happen over the next 12 months? Okay. We are potentially seeing more people come into the property market. We're potentially seeing an unfreezing of the property market. How is that going to affect it? Will more demand or will more supply, if we are thawing, push prices down, or will there be more demand that pushes it up? Of course, a lot of demand will come from the fact there's pent up demand because it's been frozen and people feel they have more affordability. And I very, very clearly say feel, right? Perception is such a major part of markets, the way markets move. If people feel, they have more, they will be more bullish about what they can go and get, right? So there'll be more activity going on. Now, we're going to come back to that in a bit. What I would like to do is talk about the Bank of England monetary report today, okay? Because there's some interesting takeaways from it. Now, if you haven't seen it, interest rates were held, funny old thing, 5.25%. What I thought was interesting was the split of the vote. So out of the 9 votes, 6, but let's just zoom out a little bit. For the first time, there was a 3-way split, i.e. all options were voted on. Out of the 9 votes, 6 voted to stay where we are, 1 voted to drop, and 2 people still voted to raise interest rates. So there's still an appetite there of the bank to raise interest rates. Now, when we look at their reports, we can see, that's not the report. We want this one here. I'm going to go through some of the overviews here. In fact, I want to start with this table here in their monetary policy summary. Now, this is a forecast summary of where everything is, sort of GDP, inflation, unemployment, and bank rate over the next 3 years. So we are here in Q1 2024, and we are expecting effectively flatline. Now, we'll see what comes in from the last quarter. And that's the last quarter is October, November, December. So if you remember, December is going to be quite pivotal in terms of the GDP. If we have a little drop and we go into a quarterly drop, we are in technical recession because the quarter before was a negative. So we're kind of flatlining at the moment. By the way, these brackets, these figures in brackets are the projections from the November 23 monetary policy report. So the forecast, the analysts are expecting us to return to growth in 25. So we're expecting flatline in 24, growth in 25. But by the way, growth, 0.5% is not great, right? 2026, 0.8, and 2027, 1.5. So not exactly startling growth figures. So we are effectively flatlining as an economy. Don't forget, that is overall GDP. Something we talk about a lot on this channel is the GDP per capita, which for me is the more relevant figure. Let's look at the inflation. Forecasting it to be down at 3.6. This time next year, 2.8, 2026, 2.3, and 2027, 1.9. Now, I'm going to dive more into this model because there's more to it than that. Unemployment rate, we see it creeping up slightly, but not hugely. So they are still anticipating the labour market will stay tight, even though it's obviously loosening. They're saying it will stay tight. By the way, these are just objective figures. I'm not giving you any opinion. I'm just saying what they have on their monetary policy report. Here's the interesting one, right? Bank rate. Right now, or Q1 2024, model is 5.1, bearing in mind we're 5.25 now. Last November, it was 5.3. 2025, Q1, 3.9. And in November, the forecast was 5. So that, to me, is the biggest thing I'm taking away from this monetary policy report. That they've said that this time next year, the forecast is bank rate will be sub 4%. Okay, and then going down to 3.3 in 2026, 3.2 in 2027. So that's where they're expecting it to go. So I feel they've actually given us a direction here in terms of where we are going in terms of interest rates. So that's a massive difference, by the way. This is, what's that, 2 months, 3 months? 2 months. 3 months difference in terms of report. So November to now, the forecast is from 5 to 3.9. It's a decent drop. Okay, so I think that's significant. Let's look at the inflation and what they are saying. Let's just start at the top here. There we go. It's a horrible image of Bailey. They're talking now about they feel inflation is going to continue to drop quickly for the next sort of 4 to 6 months. And then they think it's going to go back up again. And effectively, what they are saying and forecasting is that inflation is dropping significantly and quickly now because of the external forces at play that we don't have control of. So, for example, cost of utilities, cost of gas, cost of crude, all of those things that we've talked about for ages that are external factors, right? We have no control by using that very crude lever of interest rates, and they are dropping off. They are the transitory things that initially caused the supply shock that caused that initial inflation. What they are saying, however, is there is the more systemic core inflation, which has clearly now become internal, mainly due to, I would say perception, greed inflation, past the parcel inflation, wage growth inflation. So they're expecting that to sort of to rear again later in the year, which is why I think they're being a little bit cautious about talking about interest rates. So just to clarify on that, they're expecting to drop rapidly, probably first half of this year, and then go back up again. So I don't know if you can see that on this graph. It's quite difficult to see, but we've got these diamonds are the forecast. So we've got diamond Q2 going back down a lot. Then I believe this will be Q3 raising back up to almost 3, and then coming back down, or that could be 2025, probably up to 3%, and then down to target. So effectively, we're going to go down, up a little bit, and then back down. That's what they are forecasting for the inflation. So we're going to have to obviously keep an eye on that. That's a more granular look at it there. All right. So rising slightly again. I think that's interesting. You can look into this quite a lot. There's loads of interesting things. I recommend you have a quick browse through this. We've got lots of good fan charts. Here's our GDP growth. Pretty rubbish. So that's not going to do much. This is the unemployment rate again, increasing, but not massively. And this is what I mean when we talk about data. It's so difficult to actually understand, where we are in terms of things like unemployment, because we're using experimental data, because the data is low in terms of volume. It's difficult to understand exactly where we are. Okay, so basically, they're kind of saying stagnation. We're going to be stagnating for the next few years with interest rates coming down, probably sort of second half this year into next year. How's that going to play out into the property market? That's probably, well, in fact, before we do that, before we talk about that, let's have a look at what the sort of reactions are around the markets. Okay, so this is today's 10-year gilt bond. If I just zoom out a little bit, the markets are liking the yields are coming down, right? Which means the markets are now feeling more confident that we are going to have those interest rate cuts. So that's how they've absorbed it. So we've dropped over the last week. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Over the last week, we've gone almost 4%. Okay, and we're down at 3.7 in a week. If we zoom out even more, right, you can see that we were falling quite rapidly. And we hit, what was that, 3.4 just after Christmas. And then we had a spike up back to that sort of 4%. Now, I'd imagine that spike up was due quite a lot in terms of what was going on in the Middle East. So the hostilities in the Middle East and potential crisis there. And then going, is inflation actually going to go away, or is this all going to feed back through? But we're coming back down again. So that's what the markets are thinking. What else we got in here? I'm not particularly fussed about those things. We'll get back to the thread. Sorry, we'll get back to the threats in a sec. So effectively, that's where we are after today. Direction, I think, looks increasingly like interest rates will be coming down. I know the markets, if you looked at it last week, were actually saying 1.25%. I think we'll probably be, as I said earlier this week, about 0.5%. Let me know what you think. Put your comments in about where you think we're going to be with interest rates by the end of 2024. And also, where do you think it's going? How do you think it's going to affect property prices? Because I still look at this and I still see, in terms of property prices, if we have even with interest rates coming down, we've still got a lot of people coming off their cheap fixed rate debt this year, right? It's going to be soft landing. I just feel it's going to stagnate it, if not slight drops over 2024. But we need to understand what the threats are. Okay, and this is the big thing that I know a lot of people were trying to make quite a point on my last video in the comments afterwards, talking about the jobs data, talking about unemployment. Are we in recession? Are we in depression? Look, team, I want to say something. It's easy to pick up on super polarized negative points of view and narratives. And I would just urge caution about going, everything is worst case scenario. We could do it. We could sit here and we can go, do you know what? It's all a bloody lie, right? Everybody's losing their job. everything's imploding. We're in deep depression, right? And it's all going to melt down and go horrible. And it might do. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying at some point we have to zoom out and look objectively and look at the spread of risk. So rather than just going binary, this is what's going to happen, we have to have a mind open to all possibilities and all eventualities. Okay, so when we look at it on the face of it, it is looking quite like confidence is returning. I believe with confidence returning, the masses, right, that perception will go into the masses, and I think we might even see a spike of house prices over the next 3 to 6 months, right? I would be amazed actually if we don't. If we see over the next 3 to 6 months the Halifax and the nationwide start to say massive meltdowns, I'll be pretty surprised. I think a lot of it depends on the GDP for December. If we're in technical recession, does that destroy the positive sentiment to the masses? And if we're all of a sudden the headlines going recession, red flags going, everyone goes, oh bugger, we're in recession, right? Time to buckle down, not move, and it all sort of ties up again. But if we dodge it, and let's face it, we're running up to election, I would imagine, and this is where I'm more than comfortable with talking about how figures can be fudged, right? 100%, I'm confident about talking about that and how they will be fudged for agendas. That is absolutely what happens. I would imagine there's going to be a narrative that we do not want to be seen to be going into a recession as we run up into election cycle. Maybe they do want to see a recession and then go, look, we were out of it straight away due to our actions. But let's just look at this, right? So let's just see where we are. There is more positivity. I can anecdotally, and I hate saying anecdotally because it's completely irrelevant, but anecdotally, where I am investment-wise, business-wise, speaking to builders, speaking to estate agents, confidence is returning. Interestingly, in the scaffold business, I would say we had a very quiet November, December. It was a challenging December. We've had a really good January. So it was a really quiet start as people came back from Christmas. But I think in construction, a lot of people take that first week off after Christmas as well. So, the big boys, contractors, house builders are not back in probably till the second week of January. So it was a slow start, but we've had an extremely good final three weeks of January. I would say in terms of profit margin, significantly better than January 2023. So that for me is interesting. In terms of where the construction industry is, construction market is. I also that there are amazing deals to be had out there, right? I think sellers are now realistic, sellers are pricing appropriately, and people are taking offers. And I've been doing deals. I did a couple of very, very good deals last year. I had one fall through actually. I've just had the vendor come back to me and said, look, would you be willing still to buy but with a lower offer? And it fell through because of serviceability of debt to income, all that sort of stuff wasn't working. I can now see that they want it to come, they want to get rid. So there is now sentiment to sell as well as positivity. So we're in that kind of transition stage, right? But I would say we'll see positivity for the next few months. We get into April, we're going to see budget inevitably, right, is going to give us some giveaways. Is that going to give us more perception of affordability? If we go, so there was an article I saw that the IMF were warning Treasury not to do tax cuts because basically can't afford it. So tax cuts in this budget. If we get big tax cuts in this budget, is that then going to reverse everything again? So that's a possibility, right? Big tax cuts. The yields could go back up again because basically what will happen is what happened with trusts and quoting, right? We'll see sort of a repeat of that if they are, poor policies, or it looks like it's kind of too bullish in terms of how we are, doing tax cuts. After that, if we then see inflation start to return, right, we're going to see the increase in affordability is going to stop. Because don't forget, oh, apologies, team, we back on. Sorry, internet went down for some bizarre reason. That's what happens when you're in a basement. There we go. We're back on. So we're talking about as we go into the summer and beyond, will the affordability then come back in? What's going to happen to utility prices? At the moment, they're set to go down. Will that reverse? Will the costs of extra shipping filter, going for diverting around the bottom of Africa? Will that start to feed in? Will the sort of giveaways start to feed in? Will we get a new government that has some policies that aren't very friendly to homeowners or home purchasers or investors or all that sort of stuff? We do not know. So I don't think we're going to be off to the races. I think we might get a bump in perception, a bump in how the models work, because the models, HPI models, hedonic regression models, will probably be artificially skewed with lower data, based on activity coming back in, I would imagine. And then, oh, so frustrating. Sorry, team. We're gonna have to wrap this up today with this frustrating internet. Vacancies dropping does not necessarily mean everybody's out of a job. I know there are some big job cuts being talked about at the moment, right? But that is not the same as mass unemployment, mass horrible recession. We're not there. A lot of these, if you see a lot of these vacancies, okay, if I can put my cursor on this, I don't know, you probably can't see the cursor, it's not showing up. As we came off COVID, a lot of people came, out of the workplace after COVID. Therefore, a lot of companies have had a lot of vacancies. You can see that the vacancies spiked and they're well above. I mean, what's that? That's double, if not, over double that kind of historical long run average because of the amount of people that came out of the workplace. This, by the way, is something that's affected the tightness of the labor market. So these are vacancies. Doesn't mean these vacancies have ever been filled. So post-COVID, a lot of companies are probably recruiting for people, vacancies they can't fill. They're now tailoring back on that because rather than employing more, so let's sort of zoom out. Rather than making loads of people redundant, they're just not, replacing people. So in any company, you're going to have the top level, people are going to, get older, retire, they leave, right? At the bottom level, we've got, apprentices, more people coming in at the bottom level. You've got all these people who've left over COVID. They've not come back into the workplace. So there's sort of, a vacuum of stuff. So you've got the vacancies to try and recruit more people, but you haven't actually recruited those people because they're not out there to recruit. And so all those vacancies have sat there. That's why the vacancies, to me, when I look at that data, the vacancies are so much higher than they have been pre-COVID. And what's now happening is companies going, right, actually, rather than refilling that vacancy, we're just going to take the vacancy off because we don't need to fill it because we're just naturally letting the erosion of workforce happening rather than having to make loads of people unemployed. So that's how I look at that data. So for me, that's probably one of the biggest risks. Another interesting one I'm going to do a dedicated video on is, and a couple of people commented on this on the last video, is the commercial real estate market. The commercial real estate market has changed a lot since COVID. You can see here, so the UK, by the way, this infographic is from the Bank of England Financial Stability Report, the latest one. And it talks about, this is the percentage change of commercial real estate. Now you can see how much purple UK commercial real estate has dropped. Reasons it's dropped are, number one, as we talked about a lot on the channel, and we'll do a little masterclass on it, a little overview of it, because of how they're valued, generally on a yield basis. Interest rates go up, values go down. So on commercial valuation, commercial property is really heavily affected by interest rate changes. A lot of commercial lending is on variable terms, and therefore the interest rates feed through a lot more quickly, and investors need a high yield, so they're buying things more cheaply. So that's the first thing. Then you combine that with the after effects of COVID, where the actual habits and employment patterns and working patterns have changed. A lot more people working remotely or hybrid working. There's a hell of a lot of large-scale commercial real estate sitting around underutilized. This is actually much more of an issue over in the States. Now, in the UK, the Financial Stability Report states that UK banks are pretty resilient to this in our country. They actually haven't got massive exposure to this. If you go over to the States, go to the other side of the pond, it's a very different story. You've got smaller regional banks who have much larger sort of debt books with commercial real estate. And a lot of them are just offloading these. A lot of lenders, want to get rid of this debt. So a lot of real estate owners, commercial real estate owners in the States are struggling. A lot of them are wanting to hand the keys back to the banks. The banks don't actually want to take the keys because then they're left with this asset they've got to pay for. And that is definitely an issue that is brewing. And this could be a systemic issue in terms of the banking system. So in the UK, we're fairly resilient, just the way our banking system is set up. In the US, it could have a ripple effect through the banking system. And of course, that ripple effect could then impact and spill over into European market and the UK market. It is actually highlighted as one of the threats in the UK as in terms of a global commercial. So this is, if I could do the overview here, this is the global real economy, so threats to the global real economy. See, however, as noted above, some banks in the US and Euro area may be more exposed to the sector, which could create spillovers to the UK via banking and financial market channels. So I think that's another macro threat that is there that we have to keep an eye on. And of course, we have the geopolitical threats, Ukraine, Russia, Middle East right now, which, all of these things could create a cocktail of factors in the future this year that make things much more challenging. So where are we at the end of all of this? Very simply, I think we have a fairly set direction now from the bank where they think we're going to go with all other things being equal. I feel we are stagnating in the economy, which means we're actually probably reducing GDP per capita as the population goes up. I think we're probably still going to see stagnation in the property market regardless. I think we'll have a bit of a pop of perception with maybe a bit of a pop of the models, the hedonic regression models that the HPIs use might go up a little bit over the next few months. I think we will probably see interest rate cuts by the end of this year. A lot of it depends on wage growth. They'll want to get that wage growth under control. And they do forecast wage growth to drop off. In fact, I'll be able to show you quickly because I didn't show you this. Important graph here of range models. So you can see effectively where we're here now. So they feel we're on the downwards curve. I think we're actually here. So maybe a little pop this year. Don't forget, we're going to get that large wage increase with minimum wage going up in April. I think that will have a little filter effect. Excuse me. And then into 2025, we're going back down. So I think they'll want to see that trend go down before we start cutting the interest rates. And yeah, I would say we are still disproportionately skewed to the downside. So I don't see anything taking off and being great anytime in the next couple of years. I think we are getting the rate of getting poorer is slowing, but we have a lot of fragility in the system with external systemic issues could tip things over into a much more ugly position that we are not in at the moment. So that's my position. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. Because I lost the internet connection, I'm afraid I lost any comments that are on. So please, 5 minutes or so, or a couple of minutes or so, if you've got any questions, any thoughts on anything we just talked about, whack them in the comments now. I'll get them answered before we knock off for the evening. And then probably next week, we'll have a look at what Halifax have to say about the housing market. There's a lot of chat on the videos about anecdotal experiences in local areas. So difficult to look at a macro level when ultimately we are a series of micro economies all over the country, right? London is completely different to Liverpool or Newcastle or Aberdeen. Everything is different. So it's very macro will get us so far with how we look at things, right? And my point of view is I think it's a fantastic time to be buying property or accumulating property if we know what we're doing. Not residential property. For me, it's the unicorns that I talk about, which is commercial, mixed use, high density blocks that we can create a lot of cash flow from. Fantastic for that. Right, team. Any comments? Anything at all from anybody? Or is my comments thing not actually working, which is very probable? Or is it just my eyes are getting so bad I've had to put my glasses on? There's so much glare I can't actually see anything going on. Okay, I can't see any comments. I don't know if that is not working. So what I'll do is I'll end it there, team. And we will have a chat next week when we see what the Halifax has to say. Hope you have a great weekend, everybody. And I'll see you next week.